Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team, where we give you our real take on today's housing market and everything to do with real estate. I'm your host, Maddie Maloney, joined by my co-host,
Joe Sambear.
So today we have a great episode. Today we are going to be talking about one of the most powerful and honestly one of the most misunderstood mortgage products available, and that is VA loans. So in this episode, it's for both veterans and realtors because there are so many misconceptions floating around that can unfortunately keep veterans and active duty service members from both understanding the benefit that they have absolutely earned and from realtors not wanting to be able to utilize this product as well. So today we are going to break down what VA loans actually are, the common myths, why sellers and agents should not be afraid of them, and why this is often the best financing option for veterans. So if you work with veteran buyers or if you are a veteran yourself, this is a must listen. So let's get into it and let's start with the basics, Joe. So what is a VA loan?
Well, great product today we're going to talk about, but a VA loan is a government loan. So there's, FHA, rural development, VA, and this loan is backed by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. So it doesn't mean that they're actually lending the money, but they're backing it and guaranteeing that lender that of performance. So essentially, they're not going to service it. They're not going to be involved in originating it. They do publish the guidelines so that we can get the guarantee. So everyone is underwriting towards the VA guidelines, which means they're following their regulations and directions so that the loan is guaranteed by the VA. But what that allows the lender to do is take more risks as far as the rate is better, and it allows them to maybe if the credit's not as good, it allows more favorable things because the lender knows there's that guarantee. And what that does, it creates these benefits, one being zero down payment in most cases.
Which is huge.
It's incredibly huge.
Because especially when you see zero down payment programs, typically comes with a higher rate, higher mortgage insurance. There's a lot of other stipulations that come along with it. But for VA, when we talk about 100% financing, it's a great product still with the 100% financing.
Yeah, there's not the negative consequences of, because of that, my rate's a lot higher. Because of that, my mortgage insurance is a lot higher. So that's obviously number one benefit. Speaking of mortgage insurance, there is no monthly mortgage insurance.
Huge.
Yeah, there is a funding fee we'll get to later, but no monthly mortgage insurance. The interest rate typically tends to be lower, especially if the credit is not as excellent. You're going to get a very good rate even with a lower credit score. More flexibility, speaking of credit, more flexibility when it comes to bankruptcy, charge-off, collections, having some negativity in your past, lower credit score, how we look at income sometimes can be more favorable. So there's definitely, and the debt to income can be higher. So it really is very flexible from that perspective. The VA loan is assumable. We talk about loan assumability. Most loans can't be assumed, meaning if you were to sell your house, the buyer would be able to take over your existing loan. That's usually not allowed. VA loans do allow it. There's some rules and regulations in regards to that, but it is a assumable product. And there's like stronger protections for the buyer. Some of the negative things maybe that is perceived in the real estate world are actually positives for the buyer. Just what fees they pay, making sure they're not taking advantage of in certain ways. If the house doesn't appraise, there's a relief in that regard. So there's a couple things in there that are really good, strong consumer protections for the veteran.
And so I feel like the common knowledge as well is that, a VA loan, it's there, but it's not really used a lot. And that's just not the case. The VA has guaranteed nearly 29 million home loans since 1944 and currently backs nearly 4 million active home loans. This is not just a niche loan product. This is a great product that is being used and that we want to continue to use and market out there so that we can help these veterans take advantage of these amazing features of the VA loan. It's one of the most established and strongest mortgage programs in the country. So we kind of started talking about a little bit of the misconceptions. And one of those is that VA loans require money down. And let's just start with that a lot of buyers, and honestly, even some agents right now, think that VA loans still require a down payment. And that is just false.
Yeah. So one thing we do when we're working with a veteran is we get their certificate eligibility that tells us what they're entitled to. And then we, based on that entitlement, we do a loan calculation. And in most cases, when they've served enough time, whether it's active duty or reserve, we look at their service levels. If they qualify as a veteran, we look at their loan entitlement, and then we'll know what's allowable. And at that case, we look and say, most times they're going to be allowed the 100% financing, zero down payment, which is huge. So on a purchase price, if you're thinking, okay, there's a $350,000 purchase price, a conventional buyer is going to need 5%, that's $17,500 plus closing costs, plus escrows. And so a veteran can, get into that home much easily, especially after their service is done. Maybe they haven't had time to reestablish, and when they've retired from the service, they're kind of just getting reestablished. And with another job, it allows them to move more freely without having to have a huge down payment. When you get into the other advantage with that of having more money, it preserves more money. So like if there is things they want to do with that house or improvements they want to make, it gives them a lot of options. Moving expenses, it can be expensive to make that move and across the country or resettle your family.
And that's always what our hope is that we do not want you depleting your entire savings in order to get into a home. That's not setting you up for success for home ownership. And so having that 100% financing, even if maybe you have enough funds for maybe 5% down or something, being able to put that in your savings for an emergency savings, or, have that to put into the house, or just, have that comfort level is just so big to be able to utilize that and to have that option available. So just a great option.
And one of my experiences it has been with VA loans is, sometimes people think low down payment, like, oh, it's a risky situation for the buyer. I find that not to be the case with veterans. They've very established typically, and they have reserves and usually are in a really good position. So we don't want to put them in a bad position.
Absolutely.
With no down payment, of course.
And so according to Navy Federal's 2025 National Survey, 55% of respondents incorrectly believed a down payment was required. So that's why we do this podcast. That's why we want to, go into the specifics of these products and combat these misconceptions that are out there and show you that, homeownership is going to be achievable. Even if you think that, okay, well, my credit's not great, I don't have a ton saved down. Well, it's always in your benefit to, get with a lender, see what you can be pre-approved for, and look at all of your options, because a lot of the times what you might think is true actually isn't the case. And as you can see from that survey, 55% of people had the misconception there.
And it could be reversed too. Sometimes we do have veterans coming to us saying, I want to use a VA loan. There are some incidences where it's maybe not advisable to do that. So
absolutely.
That can be
so when we have veterans come to us, of course we are going to look at the VA option, because that is typically maybe going to be in their benefit, but we can also look at conventional options as well. Sometimes, if they do have that funding fee that needs to be in there, maybe a conventional option is going to be better in that case. But, it's not just, oh, you will only be able to get a VA loan. That's not the case. We can still look at a variety of options, but we just wanted to show you that there are so many benefits to the VA loan that you shouldn't just count it out right away. We want to be able to look into that to make sure to see if we can take advantage of some of the great products. So now the next misconception that we typically see is that VA loans are harder to get approved, and that is just not the case either. People assume VA loans are harder to qualify for, but in reality, data often shows the opposite. In 2026, industry analysis using HMDA data found that VA loans had a lower denial rate than conventional loans. So, again, that just goes to show, if you think that maybe your credit is lower, maybe you're not quite stable just yet, still reach out. still see if you can get pre-approved. It's often the case where, we can get things to work and we can help you achieve your homeownership goals. So VA loans are not harder. In many cases, they're actually more forgiving because of the program was designed specifically to support home ownership for veterans.
And there's a lot of common sense being used, I think. Even though there's the guidelines, the VA has certain guidelines in place, they do allow some flexibility. So for example, if, we had a customer who maybe was approved conventionally and maybe we revisited their credit again, pulled credit, and a charge-off pulled up. On a conventional loan, that could be troublesome. That could be a problem. There's not as much flexibility. With a VA loan, the underwriter has more discretion there, and the guidelines make it clear that maybe that's not an issue for them. Because that's where that flexibility and the denial rate comes into place. It is much more favorable. Also, because there is like certificate eligibility and different things that have to be looked at, it's also more common that we're analyzing that stuff and spending more time up front, getting some of that reviewed. We might even have a VA underwriter, which we have specialists on staff, VA underwriters who, can go directly to VA to get questions answered. So if there is something that's a little uncertain or we're concerned about, we really try to address that earlier, and it eliminates that issue.
And that kind of leads us into the next misconception, which is VA loans take forever to close. Again, not the case. And realtors, this one is especially for you. One of the biggest fears in a competitive market is timeline, which we absolutely understand, especially in today's hot market. But a lot of listing agreements still think VA loans close slower. And really, that's just not the case. That myth causes some sellers to unfairly favor conventional offers. But the truth is that VA loans can close on timelines very similar to conventional loans. Like Joe just mentioned, there is typically not a lot, but we gather all the documentation up front for VA. We want to get all those VA certificates and anything needed to make sure that we are estimating the loan terms properly, whether that funding fee is in there. We're doing all the work up front to make sure that you are pre-approved and that you're qualified, so that when you do get that accepted offer, which we are so excited about, that it goes smoothly then at that point. And so if you've had the case of, maybe something went longer, make sure you're getting with a good lender that does all the upfront work so that we can have a great smooth process once you get that accepted offer, and that we're staying on timeline, which is what we always do. That is what our team strives for always. So typically VA loans can close on timelines very similar to conventional loans. Recent lending data shows VA closings are often just within a couple days of conventional averages. Now that's the national average. When you look at the Joseph team average, we're pretty on time with everything. When you set your closing date, we are meeting that closing date. No matter if it's VA, RD, any of the governmental loans, we know that you are going to be utilizing this product. That's why we're doing the work up front, so that we are meeting those contractual timelines.
The other piece of, just from experience with the turnaround times, the lag of a couple days, I think part of that might be because some veterans will go to sometimes they go to a national lender. And I bet if you looked at a lot of the data, a lot of those national lenders on their conventional or VA are probably lagged. And so you really should look at also your local lender for, sometimes I think people think, the name of, this veteran group, they're more, all they do is VA loans and maybe they're better at that. I really think you should compare rates, because I think you'll find that local lenders can compete at the same rate, if not better, a lot of times. And that's when the timeframes really can come into, we can control our schedule, make sure things close on a timely basis and are looked at on a timely basis.
And that's a great point to make for realtors. Realtors, if you are constantly working with veterans, or you want to broaden your clientele base and you want to start working with veterans, make sure that you are paired with a great local lender that is able to do VA and has experience in it. Because like Joe said, we are typically able to do all the same things, but also close within timeframes. We're meeting deadlines and we are doing all the work up front. So make sure that you have a great VA lender partner that you can rely on, so that we are protecting both you and your customers when it comes to these contracts.
And we mention it all the time. I mean, if you are a veteran pre-approved with a national lender or a big veteran lender, you still can get pre-approved with another lender. You can still get pre-approved with us. Use that to get your offer accepted. If for some reason you feel like you can compare the rates and shop the rates, and if you think that there's much more benefit to the other one, there's nothing stopping you from moving forward in that direction.
And so let's now go into why VA loans are often financially better. And so we kind of talked about that originally with, the zero down payment, but let's really compare the monthly payment. So with financing, conventional financing, if you're looking at doing something that is lower than 20% down payment, or you are able to find a product that's 100% financing, typically buyers in that case do pay PMI, the private mortgage insurance. And that is a huge point that we mentioned before that is not, we don't have that on VA loans. So that could be $100, $150 savings, depending on the credit, the loan amount. There's lots of factors that go into what the mortgage insurance cost is, but it can really save you a lot of money there. So that is one huge benefit.
And even compared to other government loans, FHA has mortgage insurance for the whole life of the mortgage. So that's a huge benefit for VA loan. Also, VA loans have, they no monthly mortgage insurance piece built into it. Also, the funding fee is something we should probably chat about. So the funding fee varies based on your service level, in your entitlement, and if you've used it. So the subsequent use, the next use can be a little more expensive sometimes. It just varies. And however, the more important thing to consider, and a lot of people do not know this, that if there's a disability, that funding fee can be waived. That's a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
On a VA loan. It can save you thousands and thousands of dollars. A lot of realtors are not aware of that issue.
So especially when we can waive that funding fee, it just makes complete sense to go with a VA loan over conventional just because of the savings.
And moving into that, the next piece, as we kind of break down what the benefits are, the lower rates, and we do typically find that VA loans, because of the guarantee, the market appetite for VA loans is excellent. And so you see that the rates tend to be quite a bit better than a 30-year fix traditionally. And that's been not just the case recently, but I think over time, and one of the big benefits you mentioned earlier is this product's been around for a long time. And there hasn't been a lot of significant changes. It's not like they change the guidelines every day. Some conventional loans, you see guidelines change frequently. VA, it's been like this for a long time. And you'll find that lower rate can be a huge, especially coupled with no mortgage insurance, a lower rate, no down payment. I mean, it's just, it is the most amazing loan product if you fit into the different categories.
And so with all of that, with the no PMI, if you're able to get the funding fee exempt, you have a lower rate. There's so much that you can save there. You're saving upfront cash, you're saving on your monthly payment, and then you're saving in lifetime interest costs as well. So if you consider all of those factors, the savings on a VA loan are just so considerable. And that's why we love this product, and we love being able to work with VA when we are able to utilize this and it's in their best case.
A couple other unknown things about the disability, not that it's tied to the VA loan at all, but a lot of states do waive the real estate taxes for disabled veterans. Here in Michigan, that is definitely an option. You have to file appropriate paperwork, but you can waive your actual real estate taxes. It's a pretty significant benefit veterans, disabled veterans really should be aware of, and realtors should be aware of.
And so again, check with the state guidelines to see if you would qualify for that. But if you do, make sure to take advantage of that, because we talk about the PMI costs. If you are able to not have to pay on your property taxes, that is just a mountain of savings.
And that one you have to be very careful on, because it's not something that's automatic. You actually have to go in and file appropriate paperwork.
That's not something that we can do on our end. As Joe said, you do have to go in yourself to go and get that exemption from it. But absolutely worth the paperwork and looking into it if you can save that. Just phenomenal, really. So now let's get into why agents love VA buyers, or why you should love VA buyers. And so VA buyers should be some of your best clients. These are highly motivated buyers who have earned an incredible financing tool. Please don't let myths about appraisals or repairs scare you away. Yes, VA appraisals include minimum property requirements, but honestly, these standards are about making sure that the home is safe, sound, and sanitary. That's all we're looking at. It's not anything major. We just want to make sure that our veterans are being taken care of and that the properties that they are getting into are sound and safe. So there are some things that you should look out for if you are going to be utilizing a VA loan. And that's some things like peeling lead-based paint, broken handrails, exposed wiring, and major safety hazards. But all of these are something that if you get an appraisal and the appraiser does point out some of these, they can be rectified. And so I think that it definitely should not be something that turns you away from being able to use a VA loan. These are usually issues that can be addressed and should be addressed right away anyways, whether you're moving right in or getting it addressed before closing.
You know, and this comes up, I would say this category is so misconceived by the real estate market because really, even on a conventional loan, they don't go through maybe the same forms and look at the same things always and check the same boxes. However, if an appraiser is going to a conventional home to do a conventional appraisal and they see issues like a broken window or a repair issue, it's not uncommon for a conventional appraisal to have these kind of conditions. I think there's a thought that, because it's conventional appraisal, none of those things are reviewed. If an appraiser sees it, they have full right to make a comment about it saying this needs to be addressed, whether it's safety, soundness, repair. If there's something they feel needs to be brought to someone's attention, they're maybe not looking at the same checklist like you would on FHA and VA. But we find a lot of the FHA and VA ones are very easily resolved issues. There's not many that we can't resolve.
We don't want it to be the common thought that, they're just looking to kill the deal. They're just looking to nitpick. And no, we're looking to protect our buyers. We're looking to protect our veterans on this. These should be issues that should be handled. And so that's why they're being pointed out. And that's why it is something that does need to be done for VA.
Actually, one of the unique things about a VA appraisal, which most realtors aren't and most people aren't aware of, is the appraiser, if the value is actually going to be under the market price, they actually send out a message to the lender and allow the realtors to give more data. So there's actually some interesting, it's kind of an interesting process. It's a little different than a conventional or FHA or any other appraisal process. So it's very transparent of there's an issue with value. If you want to provide more information to help us determine this case, you can do that. And VA assigns like their VA appraisers, and they actually are under time frames and appraisal, and there's costs that are, so there's a lot of control and transparency when it comes to the VA appraisal.
So now let's get into one of the last misconceptions, and that's when we talk about closing costs. Joe, can you give a little bit more insight into that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this that, the seller has to pay all the closing costs and the buyer can't pay any closing costs. Well, that's not really accurate. There are certain title fees that the VA buyer will not pay. Like, for example, the title closing fee is an example of one. Closing fee typically is paid by the buyer. Sometimes it's split between buyer and seller, just generally speaking. But in this case, the seller typically pays a title closing fee. So it's just a small portion of the title fees. There are some lender fees that aren't that the buyer doesn't pay typically. And other than that, the buyer can't pay for a pest inspection. So there's some rules about pest inspections that have to monitor. But other than that, it's really like pretty much every normal mortgage transaction. Commissions are paid typically like they would. There's some rules and regulations about additional fees in that regard, but it's very common. Like from a seller's perspective, you won't notice much of a difference.
So one of the other last myths is that you can only use a VA loan once. So why do people have that misconception, and what actually is the truth?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that the loan entitlement. So they think when they use that loan entitlement, that completes their VA options in the future. But actually what happens is when you have a VA loan, your entitlement gets tied up with that property. Once that loan's paid off, your entitlement actually, one, you could have remaining entitlement. So you might not be using all your entitlement with that VA mortgage. But once the VA loan's paid off, your entitlement is quickly restored by VA. Sometimes if it's like a back-to-back closing, we have to work with VA to make sure it gets in, like the entitlement gets put back quickly. But yeah, you can definitely keep using it. We've had customers that have used it multiple times, and it's not a problem.
And so, we've gone over so many different misconceptions and why there's so many benefits to it, and why we think that both veterans and realtors really need to take a second look at this. If you've had, hard feelings towards being able to use a VA loan and really not wanting to go that route, and maybe even telling your veterans, maybe we should just stick to conventional. Let's listen to this podcast first, and let's do a deeper dive as well to see, all right, maybe is this going to be a better option? Because we're all about, looking at the broader picture, looking at all of the options possible, looking at their own financial situation, and making sure that we are setting them up for success.
And with the broader picture, this is one unique loan product that can help a first-time home buyer, veteran, all the way up to a very expensive home, even above the conventional loan limit. Let's say it's $1 million home. A veteran can buy a home in that price range. The down payment is adjusted slightly, but it all across the markets for VA loans.
And so this matters now because in today's market, preserving cash is everything right now. With home prices still elevated and buyers feeling rate pressure, VA financing can be a game changer for our veterans. In fact, VA lending volume has been increasing again, with purchase and refinance activities showing strong growth into 2026. So this means thousands of veterans may be overpaying or missing home ownership opportunities because of misinformation and because they're not taking advantage of the amazing programs that they have absolutely earned.
Let's not forget the VA IRRL loan. VA also makes it is the easiest refinance is the VA loan, so it's a very simple refinance as well. So if you set up the purchase, if rates move down, it's the easiest loan to refinance in our market.
So the bottom line is that VA loans are not the hard loan. They are often the best loan for eligible buyers. For veterans, this means less cash out of pocket, lower monthly payment, no PMI, private mortgage insurance, competitive rates, and powerful protections. And so this is why we want you to take a deeper look, have those conversations with your veterans, with your buyers, and let's talk. Let's set up a time to go over and discuss all options. So that is our session today on Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team. We hope today's session was impactful and that you take this back into your own practice. And we will catch you next time on Real Take Real Estate. Thank you so much.